This is the Nikon V1 and the Nikon J1. These two cameras are part of a brand new series of mirrorless interchangeable lens cameras by Nikon, and Nikon calls this series the Nikon 1, which is the reason why you see this number 1 kind of engraved right at the front of the camera. And this is their entry into the mirrorless interchangeable lens camera scene, the first one among Canon and Nikon to enter the market, which is pretty exciting. Let's talk a little bit about what the Nikon 1 series is going to be about. So the Nikon 1 series cameras will be using a smaller mount called the Nikon 1 mounts. So everything is just 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. The mount is called the 1 mount. It's slightly smaller. There is an adapter that is not out yet, but will allow you to connect to the Nikon F mount for you to use with all of their professional lenses. It also comes with a new format for the sensor called the CX format. And the thing about the CX lens sensor format is that among all the mirrorless interchangeable lens cameras so far, this is one of the smallest. It has a crop factor of 2.7, and that is smaller than a Micro Four Thirds, which is 2.0, and even smaller than an APS-C sensor, which is found on Sony as well as Samsung's mirrorless interchangeable lens cameras, which have a crop factor of 1.6. So the good thing about having a small sensor is that the camera becomes smaller as well, and so does the lenses. So what I have here is a 10 to 30 mm lens, and even though it's a 10 to 30 mm lens, thanks to its crop factor, it's roughly equivalent to your usual 18-55 mm lenses that come with your normal APS-C DSLR. They're a multi-purpose, general purpose lens that gives you, good enough for you to take portrait shots in 10 mm and allows you to zoom a little bit to 30 mm. So even though it's just 10 to 30. And this one is their 10 mm lens. Even though it's 10 mm, this is not a wide angle lens. Again, like I said, thanks to the small sensor and the large crop factor, this is your normal prime lens for portraits, right? And by the way, this one happens to have a f-stop of 2.8. So when it comes to trying to achieve bokeh effects and all that kind of stuff, this lens is the best at achieving it. And finally, you have over here a 30-110 mm lens. This lens, normally 30-110 sounds like a very small number, but again, this is equivalent to something like 81 mm to 270 mm, which is a huge lens. Let's say if Sony was to create an equivalent lens like this, it will be at least 3 to 4 times as huge. So yet, at this size, it's able to do all of that, which is kind of cool. Another thing that they've done to make these lenses really small is that their zoom lenses are collapsible. So what I mean by collapsible, let's take this lens for example. Alright, this is a 10 to 30 mm lens, and when you're not using it, it's at this height. So what you do is that when you want to start using it, just push a little button and you twist it. Alright, so it goes from the L to 10, and then now it's locked at 10 mm. And you notice that the lens now is twice as high. So this is your normal usage, and now you can go from 10 mm to 30 mm. Right, and when you're done and you want to keep it, just push the button again and bring it back to L, and now the lens is half as small. So that helps you to have a really portable camera as well, which is really cool. The other cool thing about their collapsible lenses is that the camera turns on automatically when you unlock the lens. So when I unlock the lenses right now, the camera will automatically just turn on, which is a very nice feature. So that's what the Nikon 1 series is all about. Now let's talk about the cameras itself. This is the Nikon V1, the higher end of both models. It comes with a proprietary shoe up here and an electronic viewfinder at 800 by 600 pixels. So and when you look through the viewfinder, it actually is pretty sharp and vibrant. So over here, this is the menu system. The menu system is really very simple. So you got right here a F button. So this allows you to play with different functions. Some of these features in each mode. Over here you have a dedicated playback zoom control, so allows you to zoom in and out when you're viewing photos. And over here you have a dial switch for 4 modes, 4 major modes. So over here you have the movie mode. Movie mode allows you to take videos even up to HD, and as well as 400 frames per second high speed, which is really, really nice. It can actually go up to 1200, but it will be a much lower resolution. So here you got the still photography, still image mode. And you have this mode called Smart Photo Selector, where when you take a picture, it gives you about 5 shots and allows you to choose between them. In fact, it will also selectively choose one photo that's the best amount in terms of composition and lighting and all that is the best, and they'll pick that photo for you. And then over here is motion snapshot, it's kind of difficult to describe, except that when you press the shutter, it will actually be recording a video, and then when you push the shutter, it will just kind of take a photo, and to play back, this is what you'll get. Yeah, that's all it does. So these two, the two features up here, which is the motion shutter as well as the smart photo selector, is kind of probably a novelty. And if you like to do this kind of thing, it's probably kind of fun. But most of the time, you'll probably be using the still image and the movie mode. The other cool thing about this camera is it's really fast autofocus. Thanks to the really big numbers in some technical jargon which I don't really understand. According to the specs, this is one of the fastest, or if not, it is the fastest autofocus camera on a commercial camera. So just like this, and it's focused already, which is really nice. The other interesting thing about this camera is that it has a mechanical and electronic shutter. With the mechanical shutter, you can take pictures at up to 10 frames per second, which, if you recall all the previous episodes of Gear65, the only other camera with 10 frames per second is the Sony Alpha Nex 7. But when you go up to the electronic viewfinder, up to the high-speed electronic viewfinder, this camera can actually take 60 frames per second of photos. We're not talking about video here, we're talking about photos at 60 frames per second, in its full 10.1 megapixel resolution. That is very impressive. For the V1, there are actually plenty of connectors on the side here. Over here you have the microphone in, as well as an HDMI port, and at the bottom here you have a USB as well as an AV out control. So the good thing is there is a mic in, which is always very useful when you're taking videos. So as you can see, if you're a casual photographer, meaning that the only buttons that you ever care about on the camera are the shutter button itself, the playback button, and the delete button, then you're pretty much satisfied with this camera, because the auto mode does a pretty good job on its own. Despite the fact that this camera has a small sensor, the image quality for the sensor size is not too bad. It's very vibrant colors and things like that. Really fast autofocus, and a portable camera, and like I mentioned earlier, you have really compact lenses as well, which makes this camera really portable. And of course, like I mentioned at the very beginning of this video, the camera looks very unique. So if all these things appeal to you, then I think this camera will satisfy you pretty well. However, if you're looking for professional photography, with this camera, that's when all the problems start to come out. Because the user interface for this camera isn't very intuitive. So let me just show you a demonstration, right? This is the exposure compensation button. Even though there's a preview here, you can't actually see the exposure compensation changing as you're dialing it up. So for example, when I push it to 3.0, you see no difference in the image until I press OK, and then you see the exposure go up. And when you push it all the way to the bottom, to negative 3.0, again, nothing happens until you press OK. So, which makes it kind of annoying when you're trying to composite a photo. The other one is autofocus. So the autofocus modes are here, but these cameras have no manual focus rings at all. So you take a look at the lens, you don't see any manual focus rings at all, because all the controls are here. So there's three autofocus modes, and the manual focus is right at the bottom. So you just push this button to manual focus, press OK, and turn these dials. This is how you'll manual focus the camera. It means that you have less granular control, which kind of gets a little bit annoying, especially if you really care about compositing the photo just the way that you want to. And getting into the PM and AS modes are a little bit difficult. You need to go hunt through the menu. Fortunately, you can control the aperture and the shutter speed very easily in these modes by using the zoom control over here. So over here, I'm actually changing the aperture right now. So sorry, I'm changing the shutter speed right now, which is not too difficult with this button. Other menu controls that are kind of annoying, that demonstrate how the user interface isn't really designed for professionals who are changing settings a lot, is the white balance setting. So over here you can see that there are all these different presets, but you don't really know what these presets are doing to your photo right now until you actually push them. So you can see that fluorescent, direct sunlight, and incandescent, which most people don't really memorize what each setting does to the photo. So let's say direct sunlight, I have to hit direct sunlight. Alright, the good thing is they do give you this really cool granular control to more blue, more cyan, and more green, and so on, and things like that. But you don't see the preview until you get out of the menu, and then you know, oh, okay, this is probably not a very good setting, and I probably need to go inside and change this to another one. So the controls are really deep inside there, and I can tell that this camera is really designed for you to just be left at automatic. So that's one big problem. The other problem is the fact that the sensor is small. Now, like I mentioned earlier, for the sensor this size, it can take really nice pictures with vibrant the color quality. However, it still doesn't match up to larger camera sensors such as the APS-C, which is what the Sony and Samsung is using, and even the Micro Four Thirds have larger sensors. But as a result, because less light is coming in, it's very difficult for you to do fancy stuff such as bokeh. You can achieve a bokeh effect, but you gotta try harder. It's not as simple to just put something, let's say macro, put something in front of the camera and get it to macro it and have a very fast bokeh effect. But other than that, like I mentioned earlier, it takes pretty good photos for its small sensor. So that itself, at least, this makes it a camera that's much better than a point and shoot camera in the end. So that was the Nikon V1. Like I mentioned earlier, there's another camera in this series right now called the J1, and most of the stuff is identical to the V1, except that the camera body is even smaller, and also there is no electronic viewfinder up here. So you take a look at the back here. This one has an electronic viewfinder. This one doesn't. There is no proprietary flash shoe as well. So if you want to attach a flash, you can't do that. The good thing, however, is that it does come with a built-in flash like this. So if you really need a flash badly with the J1, it is built in. They're actually pretty impressive cameras with really impressive specifications. Both 10.1 megapixels and really high speed autofocus, the fastest autofocus on the market today, and of course 60 frames per second photography. That is actually very impressive. However, like I mentioned earlier, for professional photography, if you're really into the controls, you're gonna get very uncomfortable with these two cameras because the controls are all in the menu and all software based, and they're even more so difficult to get in than the Sony Alpha series, NEX series when they first came out. So if you're into that kind of thing, yeah, you're gonna get very uncomfortable with these two cameras. The other thing, however, is that of course the other thing is the sensor size, right? Because of the small sensor size, there are certain physical limitations that you will find with these two cameras in terms of trying to get the camera effects, especially with bokeh. That's one thing I found out. And smaller sensor size also means when you're taking photos at night, it will be a lot more grainier because the camera is going to have to rely on increasing the sensitivity of the sensor compared to just receiving more light. So it's not that good at taking pictures at night. So that's one of the issues with these cameras if you're talking about professionally speaking. The other negative point about this that makes it is that it's quite expensive. The V1 series start at $1,200, and that's just with a 10 to 30 mm lens, and the J1 starts at $900. So the prices have been dropping. They started with a lot higher. So if you want to look at a camera, a good photo quality and stuff like that, you might want to consider the J1 since it's less than $1,000. So it's a good place to start. If you thought this video was informative for you, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/65bits, and give us a thumbs up to let us know that we were providing you the information that you're looking for to help you decide whether or not to get this camera. If not, also check out our website at www.tech65.org for more awesome tech content. So that's it for this episode of Gear65. We'll see you guys soon. Bye.